everybody. How you doing? Welcome to the Knoc and Knef show. I'm Knoc.
Knef CEO.
We're back, baby. So, what's the topic today, nephew? What we shooting them with?
White supremacy.
Ooh.
White supremacy.
That heavy shit today.
We have seen multiple accounts very recently of white supremacists going out and shooting, gathering, and taking action on transgender, on LGBTQ community, on black community,
Korean community,
and
Hispanics. They always take aim at the Hispanics. That's why it always kind of puzzled me that Hispanic people really try to assimilate into white culture.
Which is very, very odd to me. But we obviously have an issue. We obviously have a problem that needs to be addressed. This is a very touchy subject because a lot of our politicians, a lot of our judges, a lot of our policemen are and have been associated with this white supremacist movement in one way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. With this blue line that goes across the board where you don't tell or you don't snitch or they're your brothers in arms, it's hard to kind of weed these people out that don't have the greater good in mind for the community.
Yeah, but you got to remember, they've been taught to believe there is no greater good.
Very true.
And that they're the end-all, be-all.
Very true. So, how do we take action against a system and a community that is and has been untouchable? And I asked it that way on purpose.
This was a hard one for me because I'm ex-law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
But after watching the George Floyd shit, I challenged all black people, dudes that claim to be gangsters, all of this. I was like, how could you sit there and watch?
Yeah.
Y'all sitting on the corner with guns.
Yeah.
Y'all quick to shoot another black man or somebody trying to take money out your pocket over here in this corner. But you watch this man get choked out by this white man. Yeah, and I'm making it race. By this white man with his knee on his neck for what, 12 minutes? And this man is telling me he can't breathe. There was 4 cops out there. There was at least 10 people standing out there with guns. If all of y'all pulled guns on them, they would have stopped.
Yeah.
And my thing is, it's not like y'all were trying to kill the cops. Y'all were trying to stop a wrong. As a citizen, you have a duty. You could have did a citizen's arrest on the cops. But see, people, for one, they don't teach us certain things in school, so you don't know this. And then also, we've been so divided that if that would have happened in the 60s in a black neighborhood by white cops and there was that many black people around with guns, they'd have drew down on the cops.
Yeah.
We seen it happen even in the 70s, in the late 60s with the Black Panthers. Now we have no unity in our community, and that's why they get away with what they get away with.
How do you stop a system that is built on the thought of white supremacists, caters to white supremacists, and pushes the thought process of white is right versus immigration versus minorities versus whatever? How do you effectively put a knife through the heart of that?
To start with, you got to remember, we as people have to pass certain things on. This country was built on immigration. The white people weren't here first.
Yeah.
The Native Americans were. Like in Malcolm X, Plymouth Rock didn't land on us.
Yeah.
We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. It's like common sense stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We need to use common sense and stop trying to use
But I
the,
think
the rationalizations that other people give us.
But I think too, it's so ingrained. It's so ingrained in us. Even the maps, right?
Well,
World. Think about the world map.
Mm-hmm.
A real, authentic world map shows how big Africa is.
Mm-hmm.
It shows how big South America is.
Mm-hmm.
It shows how small the United States is, and it shows how small Canada is.
Mm-hmm.
These areas that are ginormous in reality,
Mm-hmm.
Africa can hold 5 United States. But in our mind, in the way we were raised, and on every map that we see, it's very small. America's this big, and it covers the whole side. This whole side is all America, and then South
but
America
you got to
is
remember,
big.
it's the Americas. South America is considered part of the Americas.
That's true, but as big as South America is, it's still smaller when it comes to. So any European land is bigger. They've made it bigger. Mm-hmm. So our thought process is like, oh man, America's huge. No, America's not that big. Not compared to Africa. Not compared to these other continents. Yeah. It's just not. So it's very ingrained. It's like sand, salt and sand. You can't tell. Well, you're not going to be able to tell which one is different until you shove it in your mouth and you get a mouthful of sand with a little bit of salt. We, as a people, have to start from ground level, because at this point, you said where in San Leandro?
San Leandro, the Proud Boys came in there to stop this. I forgot the dude's name. He was transsexual. He was doing a reading to the kids so that the kids wouldn't be scared of transsexuals.
Gotcha.
And wouldn't be afraid of expressing themselves.
Gotcha.
And the Proud Boys came in there and harassed him to the point where the library had to call the cops.
And in Ohio, just recently, 31 guys in the back of a U-Haul truck.
We're going to jump out.
We're going to jump out and cause a riot.
At a Pride Festival.
At a Pride Festival. And thank goodness somebody saw something and said something. Mm-hmm. Called the police, called the authorities and said, hey, in the back of this U-Haul, 20 guys got in the back, and they look like they're military. They look like they're going to start something. And they pulled it over. And now these guys are from everywhere. Chicago, Texas, Chicago, Texas, Ohio, Arizona. They're from all over the place.
I wish there was a gay, transgender, lesbian group of dudes like that called the Pride Boys.
That would go against
just
them.
Went in there and whooped their tails. You know what I mean? Just to show. Because I think another thing people fail to realize is that I had to explain this to one of my boys. People see a man dressed as a woman or expressing himself as a woman, and they think he's a punk. But you gotta remember, especially African American and I can only speak for African Americans and Hispanic Americans. Mm-hmm. Those motherfuckers have to fight a whole lot harder than the rest of them,
because everybody thinks that.
Everybody thinks that, so they was getting tested.
They always get tested, yeah. So
and all of them ain't super soft.
No,
I remember one time working in a jail. This dude walked in and seen a transsexual in there, and it was pretty. Mm-hmm. And at first he's trying to holler at it, and he looked at it and thought about, wait a minute, I'm in a man's jail. Oh shit! And started talking shit. Mm-hmm. And the chick said, motherfucker, I might be Edie now, but I used to be Eddie. I'll whoop your ass. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
But that was like a reality check, because a lot of people think because they're dressed like this, that they're girls. They're not girls.
Yeah. So
I just think people need to stop worrying about what somebody else is doing with themselves.
Absolutely. And I think that goes on along with a lot of other stuff.
But the white supremacy thing is interesting.
Another thing about white supremacy is that the fact that a lot of people, and I'm gonna kind of throw a wrench in this conversation. A lot of people that have been affected by white supremacy tend to back their what's the word? Their
beliefs or ideologies.
Yeah. So there's a preacher that is a transgender preacher that was just fired from their post because of racist and racial comments they said to another deacon or preacher. Mm-hmm. Now, this person is transgender. They're white and they're transgender. It's very, compelling to me to see a person who is fighting against what these Proud Boys and what these guys who jumped out of the van, I forget what they're called, Patriot, American Patriots or something.
But aren't they a neo-Nazi group?
They are the same guys who did the walk in Charleston. They're the same people. It's the same group.
Alt-right.
Alt-right. Mm-hmm. You have a religious person who's already towing this line that is being racist towards another religious person, but also has these people who hate them for being transgender. Mm-hmm. It's very funny to me how people kind of side with their oppressors. They side with their oppressors. They know this person doesn't like me, but if I'm getting picked on, but I can pick on you instead, I'll slide over and be like, oh,
but okay, I said, it's the hate that hate made.
It's the hate that hate made, yeah. So all these things being mushed together, we have to figure out a way to stop it. We never talk about the Ku Klux Klan who's based in, that religious thing. We don't talk about Proud Boys has been a big thing. That alt-right group that was in Charleston has been a big thing recently. But this is something that is ingrained in the concrete of the United States, ingrained in the foundation of anything we build. Anything that we build, it's ingrained, just like guns are ingrained. How do you fix that? That is the biggest question, because these guys will always feel wronged. What? There's a movement going on right now that is about, it's preserving the white race, where they are pushing to have more white babies, because it has been known that white people will be extinct by 2050 or something. Mm-hmm. Extinct off the planet, like everybody, like no white person, everybody's gonna be mixed by then.
Everybody was supposed to be mixed by then.
So there's a push to make sure that white people aren't extinct. Like, that's a big deal.
My thing is, I'm not gonna say that because it's funny, because I was just saying this to Yolanda last year watching the Olympics. It's interesting how there's black people in every country. Every country.
Always has been, though.
Every country in the Olympics had somebody black representing them, except China, I think. China was the only one. Russia had a black person. I just seen yesterday a black girl from Ireland.
Yeah. They just came out and said that the first people in Ireland were black. Just literally a week ago, I read an article that said the first people in Ireland were black, and they had dark skin, blue eyes. And you've seen my kids.
So they ran them out.
So you see so the British ran them out. Our DNA holds everything. It's the key to life, right? A black woman has every sort of DNA, every sort of eye color, all that stuff. Yeah. So to understand that and to know that, but also to hate it so much because you're so fearful of it.
Right, but see, you got to remember too, the propaganda machine on racism against black people have been so strong
for years. Since the beginning, yeah.
Because you think they always wanted to paint us as not being as smart as them. Mm-hmm. They always wanted to paint us as being better at physical labor than them. Mm-hmm. They always would, and that's part of the reason why we believe white boys can't be as fast as us.
That's true.
Because they taught us that.
Yeah. And the reason why they always thought, well, we probably always thought that quarterbacks couldn't do certain things. They're more athletic.
Blacks can't be quarterbacks because
they're athletic, but or they can't. It doesn't transition from college to the pros.
They don't think about the game like that. Yeah, and so it's interesting. But do you think every opinion and stereotype that permeates the world was created by a white person? It wasn't created by a black person.
It's always created by the winners. It's always created
by the winners. Because like they said, the winners create the narrative.
Usually the losers are dead. And so if you ask a person to tell the story, because you're telling the story from my perspective.
Like
my
somebody said,
oh yeah, he was a dirty man.
Everybody believes that the lion was bad because we never hear the lion story. Yeah. Just like we always believe that the person that killed the lion is the king when that lion had killed about 20 of them before they got to that person. Yeah. So, it's an interesting thing.
It bothers me that white supremacy is so prevalent, and it bothers me that people don't think it is. And people have this real blind spot towards it.
I think the biggest thing that always bothered me about the whole idea of white supremacy was when you started looking at most of the modern inventions that white people used were created by somebody of color. And I'm not even going to say they were all black.
Yeah, not even black. Yeah,
but there was somebody of color. And then, and then you think here in America, what's the biggest thing that we use every day? Biggest thing that we use every day.
What's that?
Vehicles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A black man created the car.
Yeah. But
they'll never tell you that.
Yeah.
Just like the reason why most people don't die in America just from living is, for one, the Africans taught the Europeans how to clean themselves with water and bathe. And that's cut down mortality rates. Then, let's forward to history. Most people aren't dying anymore of certain ailments because Charles Drew created blood plasma.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You think about all the contributions we've made. Antibiotics. Look, we made the car. We made the stoplight to keep you from killing each other. All of that.
Yeah.
But this is stuff that's not taught in a history book.
Which is a shame.
Just like you look at a history
book. But that's also another thing of white supremacy.
White supremacy, because you look at a history book, every builder, designer, things that was created is always by somebody white in there.
Yeah. It's always that. And so throughout the years, we always think, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. And it takes like February, Black History Month, for us to have all these things shown to us.
Now, sites on social media or the internet that are dedicated to letting you know this is the truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hopefully it changes. Hopefully we can figure out a way to kind of make something happen to where people of all minority groups get their credit, including white people. Don't get me wrong. It's not like white people haven't done anything, but white people in general have to speak up against their counterparts.
No, white people have to, in general, tell the truth and teach the truth.
Tell the truth and teach the truth. You can't have a book, the history books in Texas, saying, "Oh, well, they were not slaves; they were servants."
Servants.
It was servants. They're not slaves. Like, you can't do that. Come on. We know what it is.
Forced servitude is slavery.
So hopefully we can get to a point where there's enough information and our kids' friends will know what the truth is. And then it'll kind of wash out the rest of the stuff of these thought process. But it's a generational thing. It's taught. It's a taught thing, Yeah.
One last caveat I want to talk about that has to do with white supremacy. Critical race theory.
I love this conversation. This is a conversation that I get behind every single time.
So, explain critical race theory to those who don't know what critical race theory is.
Critical race theory is a college course that is it's a college course in law that has the conversation or the thought process of how does the societal things that happen in society affect minorities, affect black people in general, right? So if you have a person that is a judge and he was raised a certain type of way and he gives two kids, a black kid, a white kid, they both stole a car. Black kid gets 5 years in jail. The white kid gets 10 months in jail, 5 months in jail. That's critical race. Mm-hmm. It shows the difference in law and how black people are governed and white people are governed, and then gives you examples of how this affects multiple different aspects in life in black people's lives versus white people's lives, or minorities' lives versus white people's lives.
You know what's funny is I read a book about this when I was in law enforcement years ago, and it wasn't called Critical Race Theory, but the book was called Black Robes, White Justice.
Ah, okay.
And it talked about that. It was interesting.
But the thing about critical race theory is it has this big megaphone of critical race theory. They're not teaching that. Mm-mm. When they say they're teaching critical race theory in our youngest of young kids class, it's not about that. They're not teaching it. Race. They brought it up. The reason why it's even out there right now is because a person, they came out with the yearly lesson plan of what they're gonna teach that year. And at the very, very bottom, there was an excerpt, and on that excerpt had a book, and that book was a critical race theory book. Mm-hmm. So this person dug through this whole lesson plan, looked at this little excerpt, said, "Oh, this blah blah blah." Went to critical race theory, and they blew it up like, "Oh, they're teaching our kids this, and they're doing this," and that's a lie. It's a bold-faced lie.
It's not even being taught. It's a law theory.
It's a law theory
that's debated in law class.
Mm-hmm. And it's to show what the difference in governing minorities versus white people is. Mm-hmm. And we all know there's a difference. Let's not.
Okay.
Cookie cut.
I understand that, but I want to ask this question. When they start talking about race, this is one that really tripped me out, where it said how should young white kids feel bad about what their ancestors did?
No. I don't believe they should. And I say that because of this.
Then here's a question. And the reason, before you get into that, and I'm going to say it like that, I'm going to say yes. Because that's the only way it won't happen again. The ingraining doesn't happen if they're feeling guilty of it. As long as they're entitled and don't feel guilty, this cycle never changes.
So, okay, I have two thoughts on that. My first thought is, like I said, my son's 16 years old. Mm-hmm. You're older than me by 10 years. Mm-hmm. There's me, and then there's your son, who's under us, and then there's my son. So there's basically four different, the way my son views race, who's also mixed, is different than I view race. Mm-hmm. And the way I view race is a little different than you view race. It's getting so washed out now that the jokes that he makes, I'm like, you know you're black, right? But he knows that, but it doesn't affect him like it would affect me, like it would affect my father, who's 80, 87, 88. It's very odd. But I will say this. Even though racism as a whole is being washed out, it's us that are holding on to it because they don't really look at it like that. But they also understand a little bit better when it comes to what black people bring to the table. Not my son, but his friends understand a little bit better what black people bring to the table more than my generation or your generation did. So it's very weird because I've had conversations with his friends and asked them certain questions about rappers and movies and certain things, and they understand the weight that black people carry. It's so, and trust me, it's very weird to me.
Listen what I'm about to say. It is no different. They understood the weight of it in your generation. They understood the weight of it in my generation.
But I think the way they treat it is different.
But no, the way they treat it when they're young is different.
Okay, now that's different. That's different.
Now look.
Now that's different.
Now, even still, when we get to that college ranks and you're competing against this person.
Oh no. That I agree with.
And you start thinking about the thought processes that were ingrained in you.
Okay, so now okay. So as you
Because
as you get older, you tend to go to your like-minded people.
Not even just that. Me and one of my female friends, she's white, she's married to a black man. Mm-hmm. And we were talking, and she was like, she didn't realize how much racism was being ingrained in her by her grandparents.
Oh yeah.
And all of that.
Yeah.
And then she watched the same racism being ingrained in her children by her parents.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like one of my buddies, he was saying how his family, he grew up in this neighborhood in Turlock, and they were the first family to embrace the black family that moved to the community and all this. And he said now his mom's is a fucking Trump supporter.
Yeah.
And he was like, he was like, it just blows my mind that my mother thinks like this now, because she was always such a Berkeley-minded thinker to him. And for his mother to become this way drives him nuts. Just like he was saying, he trips off how his siblings, they all were raised the same way, but his siblings have a different idea of how race should be handled than he does.
It's I had a conversation with a lady in the store. Mm-hmm. And this lady in the store works in Berkeley. She works at a law office. She's in Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And she deals with nothing but liberals, right? She told me, she's like, I'm not necessarily liberal, but I deal with a lot of liberals, and she's a court stenographer in Berkeley, so it's the liberal of liberals. Mm-hmm. But she's very conservative, and she told me I can't express myself because I'm conservative, and things I believe are not, they don't go along with what everybody else says. Okay, I understand that. The way she views race is a lot different for somebody who I thought would view in her position. Mm-hmm. She told me point blank, she was like, well, things are a lot better for black people. I mean, they're not, I mean, nobody's getting dragged behind cars anymore. Or horses. I looked at it, I was like, you realize that is a low bar. You are setting the lowest of low. You realize you just said to a black person, at least they're not dragging you guys or dragging black people behind horses or cars anymore. I said, what do you expect from a black person to gain anything if that's the bar that you're setting? You cannot set that low of a bar and expect us to not be like, oh, like what the, really? So the way they view us, the way people and don't get me wrong, this lady's probably your age, the way they view us is very odd to me, but the way these young kids view race is not how I viewed race. Mm-hmm. I got called a nigger and proceeded to immediately fight because I knew that's what I had to do, because if I went home to my brother who found out that a kid called me a nigger at school and I didn't fight, I'm getting my ass beat regardless. If I didn't beat him up, I was getting beat up at home by somebody who's way bigger, way stronger. I hate the fact that when it comes down to it, we can't agree on. None of us can.
Well, my problem with it is it ain't the agreement of it. It's the fact that why are you any different than me? Why should you be afforded different luxuries than I'm afforded just because of your color? And you think this.
Because that's how it is. Now, it shouldn't be that way, but that's what we're saying.
But what I'm saying is, that's the reason it's like that. Because we let them continue to think these things.
The only way not to do that is to literally rip up the societal structure of this. If me and you, I'm white and you're black, and we're driving down, we're racing cars, and he waves us both over, we both get pulled over. There's gonna be a vast difference in us and how we get treated. I 100% believe that. Now, we could have been doing the same exact thing. Same record, same everything.
So watch this. Is the officer white?
Officer's white.
So what happens if the same thing happens with a black officer? You think he's going to be harder on his own than he is on the other one?
I can say if the officer was white, I don't think he would. But I can't say if he was black that I don't think he would. Okay. It's more likely to me that if he was white, the white kid would get off or get a lighter, lesser sentence because he's gonna go in front of most likely a white judge.
See, watch this. Is that because of the conditioning?
I believe so.
Because our conditioning has been
100%. But that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the conditioning of this whole thing.
Yeah.
The condition of a white man who has white children has been treated a certain way by a white officer who's been treated a certain way by his white boss who's been treated a certain way by his white father-in-law, has conditioned and told his kid this is what it is. You as a black man has been treated a certain way by your white boss, by a white officer, by a white whatever, and you teach your son accordingly. Now, if I walked around here like my shit didn't stink and was like, man, I'm pretty sure I can probably teach my kids something different.
See, I guess because my mother raised us as we're equal to. Never let nobody tell you you're not equal to.
Yeah.
And that's because my mother was raised in the Jim Crow South. When she got a chance, she moved from Memphis to California because she wanted to be able to live her life not worrying about being treated different.
Yeah.
And for them, that's what that's kind of what they were sold on with the North and the West.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah.
Oh, you can go to the West, and it's not like the South. And no, it wasn't like the South, but it still had that undercurrent of racism.
It's still like that now. And even though you have
now, I think there's more outwardly racist people in the West Coast now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But before it was like in the South, you knew don't go over here as racist, Confederate flag. Out here, it's more like I like your hair.
No,
it's very. What's that movie? It's very.
The reason I say no is because when I first moved here, I was told, you realize you're gonna be working in San Mateo County. San Mateo County is different than all the other counties around it. Why? He said because those white people think different than white people everywhere else. Because in their area, there's more of them than you. He's like, you think they was like all the predominantly black communities in that county are small, and most of them are ghettos.
Yeah, I can see that.
So and like I said, there was an ideology that I seen, me being a sheriff in San Mateo County, watching the ideology of the people that I worked with, everything.
Yeah.
It was a trip because I was like, wow.
I'm very anxious to see how.
And mind you, take in consideration that county bordered San Francisco County, which is one of the most liberal counties in the world.
Yeah. I'm anxious to see my kids who are biracial and see how they navigate this thing called life.
Yeah. Because, it's interesting. I watch how my children navigate it. And I can say for sure, my children were well-rounded when it came to their friend groups, how they treated their friends and how their friends treated them. My son too. A matter of fact, like I said, when my son got in trouble, because the white judge knew who my son was from being a coach on an AAU team. My son got leniency.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because he knew where my son was from. He knew what kind of kid he was, and he knew what he was seeing in on this court sheet. Wasn't
him? Yeah, yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
But that's the thing. If he wasn't,
right? If he had never had no knowledge of who he was,
then he would just be another nigga.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the
no. And see, the thing was, what was good about it to me is, me and this coach never talked. I didn't know.
But he
coach.
Still knew your son.
Yeah,
though.
But he knew my son, and I'm glad he knew my son.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And I'm saying he knew him for who he was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't have nothing to do with, I'm the father's friend.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
He knew my kid for who he was.
I get that.
So and that's when that happened, that made me feel like there are still good white people in power.
But he knew your son.
Yeah,
if he didn't know him,
mm-hmm.
then what would happen? That's the question. If he didn't know him, he was just another cat out there, another kid who got in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Then what would happen?
Just like, another perception that bothers me that's racist is, you're black kids, you live in Oakland. Oh, you got it rough. Black people live in Oakland Hills.
Yeah.
Black people live in $1 million homes.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like
private school.
Yeah. My kids went to private school. All of that. So it's like these assumptions people make because you live in a certain neighborhood or a certain place, or because you went to Catholic school. Catholic schools give scholarship support people because they benefit the school as academics, athletics, all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely.
And so, it's just these perceptions. And like you said, there are Anglo-Saxon perceptions.
Yeah. I think we probably have to do a better job of changing them.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have to do a better job of speaking up.
I think another thing we have to do as African Americans, or Black Americans for those who don't like the term African American, we need to start uplifting ourselves and uplifting our own.
100%.
Because the Ethiopian community, they uplift themselves. The Nigerian community uplifts themselves. The Japanese and the Dominican and the Hispanic communities uplift themselves.
That's another whole podcast.
Yeah, because
I think we definitely need to touch on that
because that goes into slave programming.
Yeah.
The thought of you can never be on this level has permeated throughout history. Even though your skill, your knowledge, your ability is on the same level or above, they had always told you can never be on that level.
Yeah.
But like you said, that's a whole nother podcast. I'm Knoc.
Knef CEO.
Thank you for listening to the Knoc and Knef show.
Till next time.
Peace.